The sport of off-road racing is full of incredible stories, wild characters, legends, and even villains. We cover it all on offroadracer.com, but there's only so much we can put down in an article. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, and that means sitting down with some of our industry's most influential characters and hitting record. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer podcast, a Mad Media production, made exclusively for offroadracer.com. Each month, we'll go beyond the dirt into the homes, shops, and lives of the most interesting and game-changing icons of our sport. You'll hear about their history, success, failure, and everything in between as we pull back the curtain and reveal the stories of their lives. I'm your host, Matt Martelli, and this is the Off-Road Racer podcast. I'm Matt Martelli. This is the Off-Road Racer podcast, and I'm here with my good friend, Pearse Umlauf. What's up, man?
Lots is up. We got a lot going on. So, just came after EJS. I wasn't there, but the team was, and I don't know, just a lot of shit going on these days.
To say the least. You know, it's funny, you and I have been friends now for, 8 years, I think?
About.
Somewhere around that, and it's funny happenstance meeting that Rusty introduced us, right?
Yeah, Rusty's off-road.
How did you get into this? I know you didn't grow up in off-road. You were kind of, you kind of slid into this. Talk about how you got into this.
Yeah, that's right. I grew up back east with I remember my first car was a Saab 9000. It was like an old one too. We bought it at an old clunker. We bought it at a place where it was an auction house and they were dragging cars through on one side and really nice cars on the other. And this was like in the middle. And that's my first car that I ended up buying. And then, but I got into the off-road. I grew up on a farm out in Massachusetts and Pennsylvania. My grandfather had a big tree farm. And, grew up driving tractors and figuring things out, right? You break something in the field, you take it back to the shop and you looked around for parts and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to figure it out.
Right.
And then I happened to, in my town of Williamstown, Massachusetts, there was an automotive photojournalist, Sue Mead, and she was like, I need someone to lug my bags to this event called Camp Jeep. And I was like, all right, whatever. So for $100 a day, I lugged your bags out and I flew out to Denver, Colorado. I'd never been that far west before. Landed at night, so it was dark, and Jeep had given her an old four-banger. It was a brand new TJ at that time.
Right.
And so we drove it through the mountains. I remember hitting the mountain passes, fifth gear, flat out. And by the time you got to the top of them, we were at third gear, punched out at 35 miles an hour. But I woke up the next morning in Vail, Colorado, and I couldn't believe these mountains. And we drove to Camp Hale, where Jeep was holding their second ever Camp Jeep event. And I was just in awe. The reliable trucks were parked, 50 deep. And that's where Mark Smith was. And I met Mark Smith at that event. She knew Mark. I met Mark and started a relationship with the family at that point. And, I had gotten into college back east, and I told my parents I was going to defer here and go back out west. And I never ended up returning. So
isn't it funny how meeting one person like that can change the entire trajectory of your life?
Yeah, I think it's very true. I think that we're one person, one decision away from making a different decision in our life choices. And my parents they had traveled a bunch. But not my dad used to say that the furthest he traveled was Vietnam, and he got drafted. And he said when he landed in Saigon, the pilot came on and said, he was the forecast today is light to moderate ground fire was the and he after that I think his experience he was a big traveler overseas,
Right.
And Mark was I met Mark and 80 years old Mark was booking trips to the North Pole. 80 years old, he took a Russian icebreaker to the North Pole by himself to go to the North Pole. And he just had a very adventurous spirit and, nothing was off limits.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in a very different environment back east. And so coming out west, just like the off-roading, back east, you're in the woods, you're in the dirt, you're in the mud. And out west, you can see for miles. You go to Moab, you go out to Monument Valley, you go out to Rubicon, and all you see is just miles of landscape and mountains. And so that took me, and particularly California. Look, there's a lot of reasons to knock California for a number of reasons, but its topography and landscape is unlike anything.
It's amazing. The fact that you can, go for a surf in the morning, go snowboarding in the afternoon, and then end up in the desert. It's one of the most unique places in the world.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to meet Mark, come out and do the Rubicon, and at a very young age. So I was in my early 20s at that point. Got to see the Rubicon for what it was worth. And then, over the years, got involved with Mark, started running aspects of the business and now, running the business that he started back in 1953.
Like, it's crazy to think too, the impact that Mark had on off-road culture, not just in the Jeep culture, but, other throughout off-road, and people seeing him and seeing the adventures that he took. And then all the journalists like Sue Mead, and others who also did that, right? And he kind of influenced.
He influenced a lot of people. I mean, one of the great stories we like to tell, and I hope I don't embarrass Chris too much, but Chris Collard, who's now in the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame.
2 days ago.
Yeah, Chris was our UPS driver.
Yeah.
And he would stop at the office and talk to Mark on his lunch break. And finally, Mark said, "What are you doing with your life? Like, if you hate this so much, you should quit your job and do something." And he quit his job. And he's a really talented photographer.
Yeah.
And he's somebody that is willing to go out and adventure. So, you talk about influence, and this guy quit his job, was then the editor of Overland Journal magazine, and now running his own organization, kind of adventuring and doing these different things. So, but Mark was just an inspiration for me because he is what today a Jeep owner is, in my opinion. There's somebody who will take their shirt off their back for somebody. Somebody who will do it with a handshake. If I give you my word, it actually means something.
Right.
And those are the values that we don't see a lot in today's society, right? So I really respect how he ran his life and how he ran his business. And so that just kind of worked well with my own morals, I guess, with integrity. He had high values for integrity, honesty, loyalty, right? And those are the things that he kind of built that business off of. So that's how we kind of work today. There are sometimes I still get burned by organizations because I say, "Hey, look, I promise you I'll do this." And they promise me the same thing, but their word doesn't mean as much as mine.
Yeah.
And so we get, you and I've talked about that before. We get eaten by that sometimes, but it's just how I do business. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it.
But we are the culture.
We are the culture.
And I think it's an interesting thing too, to see the baton pass between Mark's generation and our generation, right? And even, people like Sue, who, she called me up the other day and said, "Hey, I have this Asian social media influencer. Can you hook him up with, some media passes?" And I'm like, because it came from Sue, I'm like, yes, because of, of her contributions to off-road for decades, right? But no, it's really cool. I mean, and it's funny because as younger people come into the off-road culture, they don't know, about some of our forefathers, I guess I would call them, like Mark, but what's it like for you now, kind of carrying that forward, and especially with, the Rubicon, because the Rubicon is a very special trail, not just because of what it means in off-road culture, but because of the act of people taking ownership in it and making sure that it's something that is, indefinitely defendable because of that.
Yeah, it's heartwarming and humbling, but also, obviously very frustrating, right? I mean, so we, the basis of the Rubicon is that Mark was in there in the 60s and 70s. And back then he was leasing the company from Bohemian Timber Company. And they owned what is Rubicon Springs now. And he got wind that the Forest Service was going to buy that piece of property that is now Rubicon Springs, the halfway point. And back then, the Forest Service, Mark had fought with the Forest Service about the closures of that trail for years. And I think that's the biggest frustration I have on the trails. We see users misusing it. And, they don't understand the long fight that has been upheld to keep that one trail open, Right. And so we see it all the time, but Mark went in with a couple landowners, a bunch of partners, and they bought what is Rubicon Springs now, and it's owned by a corporation. We're shareholders in that corporation. And then he bought with other partners other pieces of land. So a lot of the private land, most of the private land that the Rubicon traverses over, because it goes over private and public land, are controlled by partnerships that Mark started. And that Mark was a realtor, and he knew if he owned property in there, they couldn't shut him out of his land.
Because it would block access.
Yep, it would block access and essentially just violate his owner rights. parts. So he kind of went into this and started buying property. And that's really what has kept the Rubicon Trail open, private property owners up on the Rubicon Trail. So, but we have fought tirelessly. I mean, just this year, a great example is we've had forests up there say, now you need permits up there. And we're like, absolutely, we do not need permits up there. So we're constantly writing a check every year to really good attorneys that are fighting our access, which is essentially the public's access right to that trail.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool concept for people to understand is that, people spent their own money, bought private land in order to keep a public trail open for everybody.
Yep.
Right? Like talk about like a true American kind of selfless act. I think the majority of people who maybe know what Rubicon is, they don't know that. They likely think that it's like, oh, it's a state park or it's something the government did that, blah, blah, blah. And that's not the case. And I think it's an important story for people to know and see how enthusiasts can have an effect, and can keep lands open. Because the Rubicon, it's funny, like I think about, the different places that in off-road culture that are absolutely magical, that are must visits, right? And the Rubicon's one of the main ones. Baja's another one. Nevada or Mint Course, that area. Moab is another one. There's a handful, Glamis, etc. But a lot of those are public land and don't have to carry the burden that the Rubicon does. So I think it's just an important thing for people to understand, and maybe give you guys some credit and come on one of your Jeep Jamborees, because
yeah.
I could tell you firsthand, like that was the funnest trip that I didn't have to organize. Right, that always makes it better. But I think for me, one of the funnest parts was getting to the Springs, and you had a woman there playing piano, and she was doing covers of punk songs on the piano. I was like, this is the coolest thing on the planet.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, what Mark did in there was he wanted to create the shock value of being in the middle of nowhere, right? And that piano story is really fun because Mark was trying to get someone to play a piano in there years ago. And he didn't want to buy one, and he couldn't find anybody to rent one. He finally found this guy at a Reno who said, I'll rent you the piano. But he goes, I need a picture of this underneath the helicopter flying into this remote area. And so, Mark sent him this picture, and the next week the guy had a big print ad in the local Reno newspaper that says, it was like Bob's, piano rental. We deliver anywhere, And that's how the whole thing started.
Right.
And then we ended up buying a piano. So we have a piano that we fly in every year. And it's a pain to fly this thing in, but it's part of what you talked about culture earlier. It's part about what we just do, right?
Yeah.
It's the idea that you arrive into Rubicon Springs and there's this crusty old guy, Michael Antuzzi, who's like a construction worker who you wouldn't think is able to play, and he plays these beautiful melodies.
Yeah.
And this year we're flying a guy over from New Zealand that we met on a project we were doing for Jeep over on the South Island of New Zealand, who's an amazing guitar player that we just like, this guy's perfect. He was in camp with us over there. We're flying him over this year, and he's going to be our guitar player in camp. So,
Rad.
And you just have this, again, what's so crazy about Rubicon is when I'm in there when nobody's there,
Yeah.
there's this beauty about it, but it also, when you are there with the people that are part of your culture and part of your tribe, there's such an energy to that camp.
Totally.
It's just breathing. And then like when it's gone, I'm sure you've done this before. You got to the races when you're out in the course and nobody's out there. You go, it doesn't have the same feeling. It is the people that make this sport work.
Yeah, it's again for people who've never been on the Rubicon, quit screwing around and go. But the best way to do it is honestly is your event. You can do it on your own. I wouldn't recommend it just because I think it's better to be guided the first time, and especially your crew. Like one thing that was really impressive about them is like you have a crew of guys who walks the entire trail.
Yeah.
So as you're wheeling and coming up to obstacles, they're helping coach you over those obstacles, right? Which takes away a lot of the intrepidation, right? Like the year we did it in UTVs filming, and we weren't sure. We were like, I'm not sure if we're going to make it, and those guys really helped us get through the entire thing very smoothly.
Yeah, it's, we get this question a lot, but it's a trail that's a hard fucking trail.
Yeah.
And you start off kind of easy and it gets worse as you get to Buck Island and it's worse as you get to property line. Like people always ask us about 3:00 in the afternoon, like, so when's camp? And we're like, 4 hours. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And it gets worse, and they're like, you got to be kidding me. And you're right. I mean, it's a trail that you really can't trifle with. I can't tell you how many times we have a caretaker that's in camp all summer long. They have a satellite phone, they have a Starlink, and I can't tell how many people come into camp, broken parts. People are looking for them, search and rescues go on because they've been on the trail 2, 3, 4 days waiting for someone to come back with a part because they don't want to leave their vehicle out there, because they've broken something. Yeah, you don't want to travel alone if you're going there the first time. And then once you get used to it, but even, look, we have seasoned guides who go up there 5, 6 times a year. And they go by themselves sometimes and they break down and it's a problem, And so it's definitely having the network out there to make sure that you can get recovered up there in one piece. But yeah, it's a fun, our trips definitely, I mean, on our Jamboree, I think we have 85 staff members, for that 3-day event.
Yeah.
So out of 400 people that are in there, of those 400 people, 85 of those are staff to make sure that we can get everybody in safe, but cook all their food and make sure that, we have 4 mechanics that are working on vehicles all day Saturday to make sure they get them running again because of broken parts and get them out on Sunday.
Yeah, it's a fantastic experience, and it's interesting too because you were talking about your first time out on Rubicon Trail. I mean, do you remember what was it that just drew you in, that put you at awe?
For me, it's the weather. Right. It's like, as much as it is the trail, it's being in the middle of nowhere. It's like cell phones don't work up on Rubicon. There's one cell phone tree that works. That's it, up by what's called the Soup Bowl area. But other than that, it's the wind in the trees that gets me, the mountain lakes. Like you go by Spider or you go by Buck Island and you jump in these lakes when you're halfway through, you're sweating like crazy on the trail and you're dirty, you jump in, you get cleaned off. That, to me, camping also at night, being amongst the wildlife. We have bears running through camp all summer long. You have bald eagles up there. I mean, it's just, to me, it's like just that. I love the time in the afternoon where the wind picks up just a little bit and you get that wisp that goes through the trees and you kind of hear that. To me, and you're looking out over, like by Indian Trail going down towards Buck Island and you're seeing the white-capped mountains and you're like, this is so cool. Like, we get to be here, And so it's just unique and different. A lot of people don't get the opportunity to go out there and be out there.
Well, and the thing that struck me is like, obviously you can hike it, you can probably mountain bike it, but like not many people are doing that because of how difficult it is. So this idea that you can off-road into these very remote areas and have a very unique experience in wrapped or enveloped, in nature, that's stunning, like it is. There's like, you just stop and look and you're like, oh, that's a postcard. And then you look the other way and you're like, oh, there's another postcard.
Right. Yeah.
And then just when you think you've seen, some shit, you get a further down the trail and you're like, you're in all the pines and you're like, wow, you know?
It's so different and it changes so much. It's funny because we could bring a lot of film teams up there and we're like, don't blow your wad in the first hour, right? Like, just stop. Like, it gets better as you go, So, and, usually at the end of the day, they're like, holy shit, I didn't know I could get this much content, and because you can walk faster than the vehicles move, essentially, on the trail. So, it's a unique location. And the reality is what we've seen with the development of the 4-door Wrangler. When that 4-door Wrangler came out, we saw all of a sudden families start coming out. Right. So the 4-door Wrangler single-handedly changed the way families recreated. I mean, we used to have people call the office and they would say, I can't come anymore to your events. And we're like, sorry, why? And they go, well, we're having a kid. And that was the deciding factor. Like, I've got to sell my Jeep because now I need a family car. Sure. And then when the 4-door came out, we get calls from the same people going, we're back. And we're like, well, what changed? They're like, we bought a 4-door and we're bringing the family out. And so, through our program throughout the season, we have about 1,200 children that will be at our events throughout the season, both Academy and Jamboree. And Rubicon will have about 50 kids. And it's great. These kids are swimming in the river. Like, they're growing up kind of a little bit off grid. They're getting muddy, they're getting dirty, they're using their RC cars, but they're swimming, jumping off the rope swing. and the families are able to connect. They're getting off the grid. They got to focus on themselves. And when they go out of there, it's tough. I mean, even the third day when you're going out, it's a rough day, but families accomplish something. And you know what? They can't bring their little kids out there and go that distance hiking with them, bringing all the gear with them. It takes a vehicle to get them there and to support that. So they get to enjoy the outside and they get to do it with us, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And, beyond the Jamboree that you guys have on Rubicon, how many events do you do a year now?
We're doing I think this year, about 56 events. So.
56 events.
Yeah,
that's bonkers.
Trust me. I know. We know this. I talk to you all the time. You're like, you want to have lunch? I'm like, fuck, man, I can't. I've got calls.
Well, and then, too, like you guys, when did you guys start expanding into all the foreign markets?
We've always had some dabbling in that. Like we helped the Jeep Jamboree Australia get off the ground, Jeep Jamboree Thailand get off the ground. Mark was always traveling around and building networks, but we do a lot of consulting to other brands overseas and developing a lot of things. So we put together this off-road network of whether it's assets like people or private land or whatnot. So we get called from clients. We have obviously the public side of our business and then the corporate side of our business.
Right.
And so whether that was helping, BFG launch the KM3 or General Tire launch the Grabber X3, those were, we were behind the scenes in a lot of those pieces. When Jeep came to us and said, we want to launch the new Wrangler, where would we go? And we ended up finding a lot of private land in New Zealand and launching that, spending 3 weeks in New Zealand, putting that program together. So it's building those networks. Like I was just over in Japan and Singapore and meeting with the local Jeep clubs, and they have like 1,000 members over there, and they're just diehard enthusiasts, meeting with them along with the distributors. Like, they're going to start bringing groups over to the United States on our trips, and we're trying to find new ways and new trails to offer our clientele here in the United States to go overseas. A couple of years ago, we were contacted by a guy over in Germany that runs a program called Jeep Experience. And he had access to do stuff in Iceland. And it was right before COVID. So we got geared up to do this, and COVID hit and shut the world down. And last year we piloted 2 trips to Iceland in the summer, and they were just awesome. And this year next month, we actually go to Iceland, and we do what's called a Winter Odyssey, and we run over the glaciers for like 6 days. And I just have pictures that were shot to me today that are just, the guide described it as, he says, the closest sense of freedom I have ever experienced, because you can drive in any direction you want, any speed you want. He said you're just all over the place because you're floating on 44-inch tires over the crust of this thing with and it's just spectacular. So we have one of those next month, and then we started them in the Azores as well, and we provide all the vehicles, which is really cool. So people can just sign up. All the hotels are taken care of. We provide the vehicles, the guides. You just show up and we go.
That sounds like a good time to me, man.
Right?
Attention Off-Road Nation. The Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship comes roaring through Parker, Vegas, and Barstow in 2024. It's 3 of the most prestigious and competitive off-road races in the sport. It all starts with the return of the Parker 400 in beautiful Arizona, January 10th through the 14th. Then it's the biggest, baddest, most grueling off-road race on the planet. The BF Goodrich Tires Mint 400 comes roaring back into Sin City, Las Vegas, March 6th through the 10th. And finally, the climactic conclusion of the Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship, the California 300, returns to Barstow, October 2nd through the 6th. Visit UnlimitedOffRoadRacing.com for complete details. The 2024 Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship is here.
No, it's really cool and remarkable that you've taken, this idea of, having an event, on the Rubicon and expanded it to all these different areas all over the world. And you and I talk a lot about different locations that we race and all that kind of stuff. But I love that idea of like traveling the world off road, right?
Yeah, really. Like seriously. And that's what Mark, like in our office, we have 24-foot anaconda skins that Mark he brought back from the jungle, and spiders from Madagascar. Because, Mark, not only did he start the first Jeep Jamboree on the Rubicon and kind of what Jeeping was as a sport, there was not really an organized trip until 1953. But in 1979, when you talk about spending your own money, he and a bunch of people spent their own money doing the longest overland journey in history. the Expedition de las Americas, driving from Tierra del Fuego to Prudhoe Bay, Alaska via the Darien Gap jungle. That trip put him in the Explorers Club of New York with like Ernest Shackleton and Sir Edmund Hillary. Like there's Mark with his long ponytail and the word Jeep tattooed on his right buttocks. And then in I think it was 87, he was Camel Trophy team leader in Madagascar.
Yeah.
And so he had all these experiences, but his idea of adventuring was not, going to your local mall or your beach. It was like, where am I going to go that's going to push the limits?
Yeah.
And I remember in his 70s, he was over looking at the Silk Road with a group from China, driving over there, trying to figure out the old Silk Road routes. He was still trying to figure out the next adventure, right? So, and his idea was that his experience of off-roading was the Darien Gap level, right?
Right.
But everybody has that Darien Gap moment where they go out on a Jamboree or go out anywhere and they conquer some obstacle that they don't think they're capable of. And they have that moment where they go, oh my gosh, this vehicle can take me to further destinations.
Sure.
I'm capable of doing these things. And it kind of carries on a life of adventure after that.
No, 100%. And I think it's very interesting too, like, when you talk about the Jeep platform and where it's been, multiple wars, probably every continent in the world, right? Like, and the fact that it's still going and still being used as a tool for adventure now is remarkable.
Yeah, let's hope that we can keep that going.
Oh, I mean, it was funny because I was just in EJS and Moab, and one of the things that was really cool to see is the families, right? So the first trail that we did was Fins and Things, and on the back section of that, there's a remote camp area, and we pull up and there's 6 kids playing with their little cars in the dirt and everything, and I'm laughing. I'm like, those kids are going to grow up to be awesome human beings because they're having this experience now.
Yeah.
So no, I think off-roading actually has a brighter future than ever before. In multiple vehicle platforms.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we're seeing that. Obviously, there's a change in this industry, right? I mean, you had 5 years ago, Jeep was the only game in town, and now Broncos come out. And to be honest with you, they've done a really good job tapping into that community. And you have Scout that's getting ready to come out.
Yeah, well, not to mention the UTV platform. Like, we've seen an explosion in younger people racing with us and participating, beginning at 6 years old. So now we've got generations of families who've, grown up in off-road in multiple different platforms. So, it's grown quite a bit, and I'm excited for the future. I think that you and I talk about this idea a lot of like, all right, great, you got a Jeep, so you're a product owner, but we want to bring you in and teach you the ways of our culture so that you become an off-roader and a part of our culture. Yeah,
it's really well said. We always talk about, owning a Jeep, you're a Jeep owner, and there's a difference between being a Jeep owner and a Jeeper, right? It's
sure.
Like there's a cultural shift, like you talked about, an attitude shift, a mindset shift.
Yeah.
It's not just, okay, you can own the vehicle and wave to other people. That's the beginning of the culture, right? But getting outdoors and seeing how this group interacts with each other, what our values are. I always say that Jeep owners, navigate, their off-road journeys with a compass, right? North, east, south, and west. But we Jeepers, typically, and off-roaders, navigate their lives with a very unique set of moral compass values. And so those are the things that align to be part of that community, right?
Sure.
And so, like you said, you can be a product owner, but it's not embedded into you until you finally kind of got out there and start to see how the culture works. And that's the difference between the two. And once you get that, you're hooked. And not only hooked, but I'm sorry, but it does elevate the capacity and level of who you are as a person, because you're part of this group now. You understand how we all facilitate, and how we work. And it's uniquely different than any other.
Well, I think the other thing that it does is it shifts your perspective, right? So like everybody else in the world is operating within the known world of like highways, freeways, where they're told to go, where they're told to eat, all these types of things. But like once you kind of become an off-roader, you start looking at everything around you and you're like, I wonder what's up that road. Oh, look at those mountains. I wonder if we could get behind that, right? And it opens up this kind of this explorer adventure part of your brain And for me, it doesn't stop. Like, I'm like, oh, cool. I want to go to this country and go drive up in this area. But it was interesting again, like having just come back from EJS, one of the things that I noticed on the trail was, of course, we're go fast guys. So we're having a little bit of a problem being patient with people. But we had really rad interactions with people. Hey, where are you from? Oh, you're from, oh, what do you do? And they're, so that part of it was cool. The other thing that was really cool is seeing the license plates because, Southern California off-road guys, it's mostly, Nevada, California, and Arizona people. But you go up to Moab and you're like Illinois, Indiana, Philly, like everybody, and from some unusual places.
Oh.
And so talking to people and they're like, yeah, this is the one really cool trip we do every year. And we come out to Moab for Easter Jeep Safari and we're from, Montana or Illinois or, someplace. And that I thought was really cool.
Yeah, we see it like at the Ouray Jamboree every year. We have, I think last year we had 25 states represented for 110 vehicles, right? So you're getting people from all walks of life out there. And that's the other thing that I love about this community is it kind of breaks the barriers of cultural beliefs, right? So when we're out on trail with people, I remember this great story that Mark used to tell me was this federal court judge, and this really blue collar mechanic. And they met at a Jamboree. Now, they never would have met in their own social circles, right? This guy was doing like antitrust cases in Washington, D.C., super high-profile federal judge. And he had this guy with his family, and they were at a Jamboree, and the one guy got stuck, and he helped pull him out. And they were just riding next to each other, and they became friends, and they became lifelong friends. And they started going to Jamborees together. They never would have met had it not been this common denominator that brought them together. And for the most part, what I love about off-roading is you get into that culture and it's not about how much you have or whatever because you can be humbled in a minute. You have a $100,000 rig that goes out and you get stuck or you flip over and the guy who's got something that's like an old YJ, he's piling through it because he knows how to drive a little better. It takes a better line.
Yeah.
And so you're all on the same page, at the end of the day. And it's just, I like that. And it's kind of, we're all here together. We're all as one. And that's how we treat each other. And everybody, the other thing that Mark taught me, and I think is so indicative of this culture, is that I find that people don't give a shit about where you are in the hierarchy of society.
No.
You get treated the same, by the way, out there as anybody else. So that's whether they're treating you with respect or they're giving you a little jab. It doesn't matter where you fall. It's like, we're all the same out here.
Yeah.
So, and I really like that about this community.
Yeah, no, definitely. Again, it's really fun to see, different people, different age demos, socioeconomic demographics interacting is like, well, it doesn't really mean shit. You're in Moab now, man. Like,
right? Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah, that's true. And that's just how it should be too, right? It's like, and we get off on our own world doing stuff and we forget that we're all together in this whole thing together.
So you get pulled into this whole thing, this whole world. And, then you continue to climb on the business side and you end up running this whole thing, which is fucking hard and stressful. And there's a lot of travel and there's a lot of people that depend on you. There's a lot easier ways to make money.
Yeah, there's a lot easier ways. Trust me, there are days I'm like, today I wish I could just go into some job and punch in and punch out. And that lasts for about 30 minutes.
What do you think that is that you clearly love doing this, right?
Well, like I was a terrible student in high school. I had learning disabilities I think my parents could probably put a rap sheet down of all the learning disabilities I had. So, but I grind really hard and I have a lot of respect for people who are able to put their nose to the grindstone and just make things work. And so I'm the kind of person that gets up at, I was up this morning at 4:45. And you and I are typically texting pretty early in the morning because I know you're up. But same with like Rusty. Rusty is the same way. He's texting really early in the morning. But I'm the person who gets up and I don't feel like I actually work, right? Because I love what I do so much that it doesn't feel like work. And I think that's a hard part in personal relationships too, because it could be 10 o'clock at night and I'm on my phone texting somebody I'm just making sure one of my guys made it to an event because I really do care about them. They're on the road 8 hours driving, and did they get to the hotel all right? Or do they need my hand and assistance in booking something for them because they don't want to be on their phone while they're driving the last hour. So I take a lot of pride in ensuring that my team and the team that makes up our organization is really well cared for. But yeah, it's no doubt that it's difficult, right? But at the end of the day, it gives me the opportunity to go, to the beach and catch a wave also, at the end of the day to go, I'm going to go surfing for an hour because I'm going to grind a little harder tonight, And so, but I love the challenges that come with it because you actually have a hand in how the decisions are made, and it really is about, can I pick up that phone? Can I find a solution to this problem? And I can't tell you how many, my weeks are spent at least once a week. There's some hiccup that happens, and you're trying to find a solution around it. And it doesn't matter the education level you have for it. It's like, how do I figure this out?
Oh, it's constant problems.
And I think that's really interesting to me. But at the end of the day, what makes us and our team really, enthusiastic about this is when we watch the owners and the consumers come out or the clients come out that we do a good job. And when they write us a note at the end and they go, oh my gosh, I was out with my vehicle. I had no clue what, your guides were amazing. The whole experience from start to finish was great. We share that amongst our team and we really pat ourselves on the back and go, that's really, we did a good job, right? You and I speak about this a lot. I think the biggest concern I have in business is complacency, right? We always talk about this as a team that we are as good as our last event.
Sure.
So when you have a shitty event, you better step it up. So we're constantly trying to re-evolve the wheel a little bit, fine tune our skills a little bit, whether that's recovery or how do we do it? We walk through as the consumer as well, right? If I'm a consumer showing up here, what is my experience like? And I was speaking to somebody just the other day about this. I was out for coffee with somebody and I said, I was asking a client recently and they didn't get it because they said, well, we want these deliverables, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, but what is the experience when that member of the media gets out of that vehicle? What do you want them to feel?
Right.
And they couldn't articulate that because they couldn't grasp what we were going after. And that's what we're trying to go after is I want someone to end the experience walking away with an oh shit moment like that was fucking amazing. And that's the kind of experience we're trying to go for every time.
Well, it is interesting in that it's very similar to racing. It's different, but it's very similar in that it's transformative, right? In watching people, especially people that are rookies, start the trail and then get to the springs and then have the reward of the springs, right? And you have that day where you just get to soak it in and just, really revel in the beauty of it. And then we have a whole day of getting out too. I think that's a very important thing in our culture now that's more needed than before because let's be honest, life is pretty easy. When you think about it, you're not going to starve, you're not going to go without shelter. All the basics, that's a pretty easy thing to maintain. So then what are we doing, especially after we go into our career to challenge ourselves? I mean, you have some people who are like, yeah, I'm going to go run a marathon and I'm going to go do this, which all that's badass. But it's also hard to do it continually. Whereas this is something where, to your point about Mark, you could do this into your 80s and still surprise yourself as to, what you're capable of and how you can continually have these really just insanely beautiful experiences. That's one of the other things too, is I get busy in my life and I forget about little things. I hadn't been to Moab in a few years. And when you get up on the rocks and you're like, man, I don't think I've ever been to another place that's as beautiful as Moab.
Oh, it's true. Yeah.
And so in many of those areas, like I said, you could do one hell of a hike and get up there. But most people aren't going to do that. So just being able to share that with people and show people this is what America's comprised of, is these beautiful, outdoors locations with amazing geography and just it's so beautiful, it looks fake. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's also a very key component to turning on some DNA that's, waiting to be unlocked, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I think that if we really get down to the basics of this, we always joke that people come to our events, because they think they want to off-road.
Yeah.
But it's not why they come back. They come back because they want to be part of the culture, the community. They've made friends in this, and that it's kind of this like-mindedness that they want to go share again. But they also want to get out into nature. I mean, we've spoken about this before, the explosion of the overlanding, market. People really, like, we see people spend tens of thousands of dollars on their vehicles to just go out and camp for a few nights. Now, when I was a kid, we would, we'd pack a canoe and it would have a Coleman stove and, all this other stuff. And we'd load that thing down. We called it the General Belgrano. You think it was like an inch of freeboard, We had the thing loaded with stuff, but that's how we camped, right?
Right.
And now you have people loading up their vehicles with this stuff, and they want to go off. And, for us, it's also being made so much more simple with things like Starlink.
Yeah.
We have one of the guys on my team, my chief operating officer, Ty, he has a cabin up outside of Truckee. And you talk about living the lifestyle. He goes up during the summer months. He's up there for 3-4 nights a week, and he's got Starlink up on this. So he fires it up. He's sitting on his cabin overlooking. It's like he has zero cell phone coverage in this area. He has no electricity to his cabin.
Right.
And he's up there doing full-blown work, sitting up there. And he's like, I worked this morning for 4 hours. I'm going outside to cut wood, drag it through the woods with his tractors, quad runners, got the Jeep out there doing things. And then he's doing that for a few hours, burning burn piles. And then he's back doing some work in the evening when he's in the cabin. And it's like, you can do this from anywhere. And that's the beauty about it.
Yeah, it's funny because, again, like, and this is true of people who are outdoor enthusiasts as well. But, like, we just did a trip where we were shooting some product for Rigid Industries. And it was my first time to the Cinders outside of Flagstaff. And there's quite a bit of snow on the ground. So we were looking at the temperatures going, we'll stay in a hotel. Well, the hotel was pretty crappy. And we went out to the location. We're all looking at each other like, why didn't we just camp out here? The experience would have been way better. And so it's like, again, that's why I think overlanding is so cool, is that now it's giving people access to, the off-road experience that didn't have it before.
Oh.
And they're using the excuse of overlanding, which is great. I don't really care what excuse they use to get out and have fun with their friends and family. Well, off-road, like, they're going to have a good time.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I don't care how you recreate, right? I really don't. And I don't care what vehicle you use. You use a Jeep, a Bronco, Scout, whatever, UTV. People forget that, you get a lot of big companies that think they're the big cheese at the end of the day going, well, we make up a big part of this industry. You don't. This industry is made up by thousands of different vendors and suppliers. It's like I was describing to somebody the other day, it's like a big salad bowl, and we're all in there as ingredients, right?
Sure.
And that's it's thinned out now that you have competition at the end of the day too, right? But, I have such respect for the businesses that are still family owned. We're a family owned business. We don't owe anybody anything. And that's what I love about, we have zero debt. We're not owned by a big conglomerate. And you and I have spoken about this in the past about these major corporations come in and they want to dictate how we recreate, how we do things, the product we use, whatnot. And these are people, by the way, who've never been off-road. Yeah. And I have, but the Casey Currys of life, the Curry Enterprise have been around, they've been around 65 plus years.
Yeah, 3 generations now.
You look at Skyjacker Suspension, still owned and operated by the same family. Rusty, again, Rusty's off-road. There's not a lot of organizations that are out there that are, and everybody I've talked to, by the way, that I just mentioned, have been offered to be bought out by someone at some point. Even we were approached a couple of years ago by a big company and said, we'd like to acquire you. And I was like, I'm very flattered, but no, I don't want that influence into what we do, Yeah,
it's interesting because I went through this in action sports where, the action sports had started by the generation in front of us, and then my generation started the next wave of growth. And then outside companies came in and purchased everything, and put these kind of ridiculous expectations on everything. And it was like, listen, there's not that many people that surf in the world. I don't know how you're going to make a surf brand that big, right? And inevitably, those expectations failed. And then, everything has been not stagnant, but just damaged since that point. Because, it's funny because I remember talking to Danny Kwok about it. Why did you start Quicksilver? And he's like, oh, mate, we wanted to make enough money to not have jobs and surf more, right? That was the point. So then at some point it became big business and nobody's surfing. They're sitting in boardrooms going, why are we doing this? We've just reinvented the businesses that we're trying to escape from. So I think that's the balance. And the thing that I really respect about you is that, you're very passion driven and you are a part of the culture. And so you're wielding this like cultural experience that's really beautiful. And so people come in and they're like, hey man, I just bought a Jeep. I don't know shit. Right. And they go on one of your trips and then it's just like, cool. Now the needle's in their arm and they're going to go home and everything's going to feel dull. Right. Yeah. They're going to go, okay, how can I do that again? How can I do more of it? How can I share this with my friends and family? This awesome experience of off-roading. And I love seeing it. It's funny whether it's overland guys and gals or, just going up to the Rubicon, I get so siloed in our race world and focused on what we're doing. I forget about like, oh, there's all this other really cool stuff in off-road. And, this last trip to Easter Jeep Safari, like I should have stayed for 2 more days at least, because 2 days is not enough, right? And it was like this thing where you got to remind yourself every now and then to like, okay, give yourself this time, and also, be open to different ways of experiencing it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think that, the greatest reward we see when we're out there is through our academy events, the one-day training programs.
Yeah.
That we see the biggest change in people, right? So that, like you said earlier, they walk in, everybody's very apprehensive. They're all sitting down very quiet, not talking to each other.
Right.
And then we do our morning session. We take everybody out for a 2-hour trail ride and we bring them back to the tent for lunch. And when they come back to the tent, people are just like on fire.
Yeah.
Right. And, then we do another trail ride in the afternoon. They come back and the number one comment is we don't want to go. Right. Well, like what's next? And so it's this real shift, this paradigm shift with people that's like they watch, and it really gets down though to the basic human elements of like psychology, because people conquer things they didn't think were possible. The number one comment we get from people at Jamborees and academies is, I wouldn't have thought it was possible if I didn't see the vehicle in front of me do it.
Right.
And it's those times that you realize what you're capable of. And it is really pushing yourself and your mindset, because the mindset at the end of the day is limiting.
Oh, totally.
They're like, I can't. And it's like, you can. We had a woman just the other day. We were at what we call the San Diego Palm Springs Academy. We were doing it in Ocotillo Wells over at Marcus's old property. And she was on the top of the hill and she was crying. I mean, she was like, I'm not doing this, because we come up to these massive tops where you don't see anything but the sky, and it drops off and you can't see the bottom. And I'm telling you to put both feet on the floor, and just trust the vehicle. And so she's in tears and she's like, there's no way I'm moving off this mound. Right. And you get them to do it and you get them off the hill. And at the bottom, there's a video of her just being like in awe, and she goes home that night feeling really badass about herself and her experience, but it does build a huge level of confidence at the end of the day. And she drives around, as she should, with a chip on her shoulder going, I've done the thing, like this curb, this median no longer looks the same anymore, right? Yeah. I know how to use my vehicle and I feel confident doing it. That to me is the biggest reward at the end of the day.
That transformative process, I think, is invaluable. It's one of those things where like, that's one of my favorite things as well, is like being at our finish line and seeing people and talking to them about their race, right? But then like the veteran racers, like, great conversations, and they'll give me the good, the bad, the ugly, but I like the rookies, right? Like, there's certain moments, like Jeremy McGrath's daughter Rowan, she did the Mint, and she came across, and she's just like glowing, right? And I'm like, I've known this girl since she was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. Now she's a teenager, and she just did the Mint 400 with her dad, right? And she's just like, that was so crazy. That was the coolest thing ever. And I'm like, cool. Now from this point on, she's gonna go forward in life, and people are gonna be like, oh, what'd you do this weekend? I raced the Mint 400, right? And they're gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
Right. So if you can do that, if you can accomplish that, then, it's a cliche, but then anything is possible.
Oh,
right?
sure.
So it's the same thing with what you guys are doing, and on a very much more personal level, because I think there's a ton of people out there that are, it's not just off-roading, it's a euphemism for life of like, I'm not going to do that because I'm, it's uncomfortable or it's risky or it's whatever. And going through these experiences really changes your mindset.
Oh, very much so. And you do. Like, we had a guy roll over at that event the other week too, just drove way too high on something and tipped over, right?
Yeah.
Did a flop on the side. But he drove that vehicle. We took care of it. We said, look, I said to him, look, these guys are going to recover the vehicle. Why don't you come back with me? They were serving tacos. He's like, I love tacos. He took him back to the tent with me, and we got his vehicle righted. We'll let it drain, all the oil drain back to where it should have been, started it back up, drove it back in for me. He finished the rest of the day. He went out for an afternoon session and drove that vehicle back to San Francisco that night,
Nice.
And it was like, and he walked away going, this is really cool. Like, I flattened my vehicle and did a little damage to my top and my fender, but he's like, this is pretty cool, you know? And to be able to drive away from that and have our team did a really remarkable job, recovering the vehicle in one, and Bon Gilmer happened to be there from Rebel Off-Road, and he was there helping us recover. It was a tricky recovery. I mean, you couldn't see the recovered vehicle. It was over a mound, one of those, those mud mounds. By the time we were done, that winch line was 6 feet in the sandhill,
Nice.
But getting it on two wheels where we couldn't even get it over because where he had gone up, it was such a tight little valley. So we had him on two wheels and we had to winch him back and winch him up. And it's this coordinated effort. But that's the other thing is, I find off-roaders to be very we just come up with the most ingenious solutions because you're in the middle of nowhere and you have to figure it out.
Yeah, there is no walking away from it. You got to problem solve.
Yep. And so that's what's, again, that the community that we're up against, those are the people that we're in, and I just love it because you come up with fun ideas, but then you come up with fun ideas for adventure as well. What can you do next?
No, I love it. I mean, it's like I have a couple of trips coming up in Europe and stuff, and I'm looking at like, okay, well, I'm going to go to this, event, Goodwood Festival of Speed, but then I'm going to go over off-roading in Portugal before that, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it becomes a thing where like you start looking at the world in a different way.
Oh, hands down. Yeah. Like, I can't wait. We're going to develop a trip over. We have 2 trips in the works right now that aren't really, they're going to be managed through our MASOR performance platform, because they're not using Jeep vehicles. One is in South Africa to Botswana using Grenadiers. We had a former guide of mine over in Botswana. His good buddy started that business, started building the Grenadiers. And so we have access to 10 of them to go up through Botswana, and come back. The other one is New Zealand. South Island, New Zealand, they don't have Jeeps, so we're going to be using the Land Rovers, I think, and maybe Land Cruisers, but driving through some of these areas, these most remote destinations where you get out, to bring people to these locations where you're flying up in helicopters and putting rafts in and going to glaciers and camping at the foot of glaciers, it's just unbelievable. And the people that get to sign up to do this will walk away with a life-changing experience.
Yeah. No, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. I'll sign up for that one. Well, that was awesome. I appreciate the time, brother. We got to do this again.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
All right.